Now when we come to joint the sides onto the drawer fronts, we've got to put some domino mortises in the fronts to correspond with the ones we've already put in the sides. Now there are two ways one can do this. One could mark a pencil line on the surface of the drawer front and then very carefully do a plunging cut like so. But because these are going to be relatively close to this edge here, I'm going to use a method using the fence in a normal way, but I'm going to put on this support bracket just to help. Now I've got that bracket on. That means now I can now set myself up for doing cuts like this. All I've got to do is to gauge the actual depth setting here to correspond with the slots I need to create. Now when I did these slots here in the side pieces, I allowed 9mm for the drop from this edge to where the center line of those domino slots are. So I now need to add 9 to the thickness of my sliders, and these are 13 thick, and therefore 9 and 13 is 22, and that means I now set my depth setting on here to 22. So I now need to hold my fronts, my drawer fronts, vertically so that I can make my domino cuts. But I don't have a vice arrangement on this bench yet. So I'm going to produce an impromptu one as follows. I'm going to take some of the ordinary dogs that come with the path dogs from Lee Valley, and I'm going to put 2 of them into this end piece of section I've got here. I'm going to put the second one in here, and it's secured, these are both secured with a knob from underneath. Now these bench dogs have a 8mm threaded hole all the way through. And I've got these little wooden spacers which fit underneath the bracket on the Revo clamp, and that helps to then make everything just right. I'm not screwing these especially tight, just enough to hold the clamp in place. So I've got everything set up. I've marked the positions for the 4 mortises on this wide front, and I'm just going to check my domino. I've set my height to 22mm. My width of cut here is on the smallest, and my depth of cut is on 15mm. Now even though we've set that depth of cut to 15mm, when you're doing an operation like this, do not put your hand anywhere where there's a possibility that the cutter could come through. Always have your hand off to one side. Everything's checked, and away we go. And there's our first domino slot done. And the great thing about using this Bessie clamp is that its jaws are relatively soft, and they're also quite broad, so it's going to grip my bits of wood pretty well. That's all the domino cuts done. All I've got to do now is put in the channel for the bottom of the drawer, and we'll be ready to assemble them. Well, I'm still protecting this new bench top from the glue at the moment until I've decided on my pattern of holes, so that's why I've got this green sheet here. Because this is MDF, if these slots are tight, it can break away that bottom edge of the MDF. So don't make your slots too tight. They should just be a nice snug fit. I'm just going to do a very quick check to make sure everything is as it should be. Now the order in which you assemble is actually quite critical. It's usually easiest to start with the back, like this, and then Once that's in place, you can then put in the two sides, one like so, and the other one, and then as a final check, the front would go on. So that's going to work. Now, I ran out of dominoes yesterday, which is Sunday, and so I've made some stock up myself last night. This is 6mm thick, and it's the right width for domino, and I've given it a little rounded edge here. I've then chopped it up into lots of little bits, 40mm long, which is what I need for all of this domino work. Now, with drawers like this, a significant amount of their strength comes from the fact that the drawer bottoms have been glued in. Because everything is MDF, you don't need to make allowance for movement. You don't need to have parts which are dry fit. So you can just go for it and put glue at every joint. And that includes the bottom. And this really does make this drawer nice and strong. I will just check this for square. That is absolutely spot on. One simple way of getting the position for these inner runners to be fitted to the drawer is to do a quick measurement to the center line of the screw holes on those runners. And when you've done that, write it down, and then you can remove these runners very simply, like so, and then fit them onto the drawers. And I can transfer my pencil line onto here and use a square up against the front face to move that along, and then continue the line in one go all the way. And that now is the center line for all of my screws. So now I can position my runner so that that line is underneath the center line of the screw holes, and I'm just going to use my bradawl to transfer a little mark. I'm going to give it a little pilot hole, and we do the same for the other side. And so there we go, another drawer in place. Very simple. Now I'm using some D-shaped handles for these drawers which have come from a local DIY shop. And if you're putting a lot of handles in which are all the same, it's not a bad idea to make up a template. I've got this piece of MDF here, it's the same width as the drawers, and I've got it such that it's flush there and at the sides, and there's a pair of holes here, and all I've got to do now is just drill straight through this on each of my drawers. Now for the drawer fronts, I'm using Osmo PolyX, which is my favourite sort of finish really for most things. But for the MDF sides and the bottoms of the drawers, I use some water-based varnish, and that's allowed it to be sealed, which is all I need, just to seal it, and that will be fine. But for the fronts, I've just added a bit of PolyX because it will protect it, and also if I get a glue spillage or something like that down it, I can wipe it off fairly easily. Now these handles are held in from behind with a pair of screws, and they're actually really nice handles. They're cheap and cheerful. They come from a well-known DIY store who can't be bothered to answer email messages from me when I ask about their products. Now one useful thing is to get the screws so they're just protruding a tiny bit, and the reason for that is very simple. I'll show you now. Get the other one there. Get the screws so they're just protruding a bit, and that allows you to locate this properly, and therefore it's not going to be flying all the way around. And then screw up from behind. There's one, and there's the other, and that's a perfect job. Now for my big push me pull you drawers, I'm going to have a pair of sides like this and a front either side, and they're going to be held together with dominoes. And what I need to do is to put a pair of dominoes in the ends of these side pieces, and then again in the fronts correspondingly. But it's quite a tricky operation to get them precisely right. I don't want to have to measure everything. And so I've just set up this little jig. I've got a pair of path dogs, they're screwed from underneath, and I calculated that I needed a piece of wood 49.5 millimeters wide in order to do this. Well, this is 49, that's close enough. And I'm going to use this now to dictate where my piece of wood goes in relation to the path dogs. I'm then going to use the path dog near the front as the registration place for my domino, and then I'm going to do a domino cut there, and then I'm going to flip it over and do one on the other side, and that will end up with a nice pair of domino holes. And there we have the pair of domino holes, perfect. And for the cuts that go into the drawer fronts, I'm using the scale which is visible through the window here. Now, it was much quicker to use my path dog method for the long pieces because there was no need to look carefully at the scale. But for these, there are only 4 of them, I can do it quite reasonably using the scale.
For the push-me-pull-you drawers, I've added a bit of detail. Along the long sides of the drawers, I've added handles, which will be useful for moving the drawers around. And I'm cutting the holes for the handles with the jigsaw, and I'll take it to the router table for finishing off. If you do this on the router table, please be very, very careful, because it's not a trivial operation. Be very careful indeed. For the fronts and backs, I'm drilling holes through a pair of the pieces and then taking it to the bandsaw, taking off the majority, and then over to the router table to smooth it off again. The whole lot is then assembled in the same way as the other drawers.
Well, that completes this video on the construction of these drawers, and I hope you can see that this method of building drawers can be used elsewhere. There is a separate video that shows you how I went about the design and the main carcass construction of this mobile bench. There's also a separate video which shows you how I finished off the top. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.